What's the most unexplainable shit you've ever witnessed? I was driving home a few years ago in a car that was only a year and a half old. It was pretty late and the streets were completely empty. I stopped at a red light turned green. I step on the gas a few times, the engine revs but the car doesn't move. It sounds exactly like it would if my car was in park. I remember being annoyed and checking to see if the car was in park. Nope, in drive. I look up and a huge truck runs the red right where I would have been making my left turn. The truck passes and my car once again drives correctly. My car saved my life. When I was a wee lad, my school was shut down for an asbestos problem. My tiny public school was moved into the wing of a high school for 4 months during renovations. We were told to stay in our section of the school, but as a lonely child with few friends, I would sometimes go exploring. Once, I was walking through the second floor of the school and wandered into one of the washrooms. A putrid smell hit my nostrils and I followed it into a stall to investigate. The toilet was filled to the brim with shit. It was more shit than I had ever seen in my entire life. Logs and logs of shit amongst some kind of mushy paste. And at the top, somebody had stuck in 3 uncooked hot dogs like little flags. It was like some kind of macabre crime scene from the movie Seven, but with shit. Ever since that day, I've wondered how the shit got there. Was it one person? Did they collect it for weeks and dump it in? Or was it the work of many? Did a group of boys line up and take turns shitting on top of each other's shit? Who came up with the idea? If they had hot dogs to stick in it, does that mean this was premeditated? How long had they been planning this? I once got crippling stomach pains on my way to the pub, managed to clench and make it to the pub toilets. When I got there I unleashed like 2 gallons of clear liquid from my ass. I don't mean it was light in color, I mean it was crystal clear. Once it was done I felt fine. I still haven't been able to explain that shit to this day. Me and my mom were outside a coffee shop and I noticed a large white bird in the sky. It was too high up to see it in detail but the way it was circling suggested it was a hawk or eagle. My mom noticed me looking up and commented how she'd never seen a white bird like that. We watched it for about 30 seconds and all of a sudden it vanished into thin air. It creeped my mom out so much that she changes the subject whenever I mention it. I was working in a 7 to 11 graveyard shift. All unexplainable shit happens at that time. But there's one that stands out. It was 2 a.m. and there was no customers. Playing PVZ in my phone until this guy enters the store, looking like he was running from someone. He told me that no matter what, if someone asks for him, don't tell them that he's hiding there. I told him, okay. By this time, I was so confused because he's holding a cage with 2 rats. Then he proceeded to get 2 sachets of Eat, a bag of Doritos and toothpaste. He asked me if anybody's outside and I told him, no. So he gave me 1,000 pesos, around $25, told me to keep the change then ran outside. I tried to give him his change still, but I tripped so I decided just to keep it. Day after, a police came to the store asking if an old guy came here. I told him, yes. They asked me questions, what did he buy, what was with him when he went here, etc., all of which I answered honestly. When they were leaving, I asked what did the old guy do. The policeman just smiled and then walked out the store. Until now, I don't know what he did and who he was running from. Edit. Apparently, since I was too busy perfecting my English in this story, I forgot the most important part. When I got a copy of our local newspaper, I saw that the old guy's dead. Not me, but my father. When he was about 15 he was playing cards and listening to the radio in the living room of his mom's house. There's a knock on the door and he opens it to see his grandfather stumbled over the porch railing, clearly drunk. This is common. Grandpa would get drunk and stumble over looking for something to eat. Mom, your dad's here. He went back to playing cards. His mom finishes washing dishes and is wiping her hands on a towel as she looks both ways on her porch. Who did you say was here? Your dad. There's no one outside. Are you sure? Yes, he was there a minute ago. He must have left. She shuts the door and goes back to the kitchen. About a minute later she gets a call, telling her phone number was found in the wallet of a man found dead near the train tracks in Kentucky. They describe the man and what he is carrying, and she gasps and asks again, who did you say was here? He was found dead a state over, cause of death was alcohol poisoning and severe dehydration. My dad always says, I don't believe in ghosts. But I believe in something. When I was 10, I remember waking up one night and seeing my grandpa sitting in my room just watching me. He didn't say anything, he was just sitting there. I sat up, asked, "Grandpa?" Even at a young age I was a great conversationalist. He just smiled at me and waved. Then the phone rang and I looked at the door. When I looked back at where my grandpa was sitting, he was gone. A few minutes later my dad came into my room to say that was the hospital, and that my grandpa had just passed on. Heart attack. All I could think to say was, I know, I don't believe in ghosts, so maybe that's just a dream that got incorporated into my memory of reality. But still. I have a bit of a reverse one. Back in the 80s, emptying a waterbed by siphoning with a hose out the window of an apartment. Everything is going great, and once the thing has been totally emptied, look out the window to see no water on the ground outside. Look closer and notice the person in the apartment below left their window open. The hose had curled into someone else's apartment and the contents of an entire waterbed flooded their place. So somewhere out there, there's a person who came home to an apartment that was completely flooded with water for no apparent reason. Oh yeah, I have a good one for this. One time I was working at Sears and I came in overnight because they needed help painting the pillars in the mattress section. So it was like 2 a.m. and I decided to get something from the vending machine. There was a total of 5 of us in the Sears building in the mall, and I went to the break room, which was on the opposite end of the store from where we were painting. I got a pack of cookies and went to open the cookies and took like maybe 3 cookies. Okay, so I ate the 3 cookies and then I heard the strangest noise. It sounded like that noise you get when you plug your headphones in something, but did it multiple times. It sounded like that plus this noise that sounded like someone took a yoga mat with something heavy on it and dragged it on a cement floor or something. This is my best description of the sound I heard, and it sounded like it was coming from my head. Anyways, after the sound ended I went to grab more cookies and my cookie bag is legit sealed as if I never opened it. I examined that bag for a good minute trying to find the freaking opening, and there was none. I also noticed that I had no cookie aftertaste in my mouth anymore. Either I had a complete brain fart or something freaky happened. Either way I have no explanation, other than that it was a pretty normal night. I just felt weird for the rest of it. It was 3 a.m. and I was driving home with a friend of mine. There was very little traffic on the interstate. Up ahead on the side of the road I see what looks like a man sitting on a guardrail. I got a horrible feeling in my gut. I had the feeling this guy was going to do something bad. I honestly felt as though he was going to jump in front of our truck to commit suicide or something. As we get closer he stands up. I moved into the next lane. As we get closer he starts walking into the road. I start panicking. There was no time to slow down and I could not swerve to avoid him for fear of rolling the truck. My friend and I start screaming. Just as we were about to hit what I thought was a man, jumps and has wings, and jumps over the entire truck. It was only visible for a second, but I can still remember it clear as day. It had the body of a man from the head to the waist, but from its waist down was hairy. The wings were also dark. The feet were the worst. Instead of human feet, were these horrible talons, similar to that of a chicken? But also dark and hairy. The best comparison I can make is that it looked like a human-sized gargoyle. I know this sounds like a load of shit, and I probably wouldn't believe me either, but I swear it's the truth. In total honesty, I wish it wasn't true. It was the most horrifying thing I've ever seen. If my friend hadn't seen it as well, I would think I'd gone crazy. Also, since this is the internet I doubt most will believe me anyway. I just wanted to share my story. On a side note, in the past few years since that night, I've met one other person that has seen the same, if not extremely similar, creature. P.S. Sorry for the shitty writing. It's late here, but I tried. Coincidence 1. I grew up on the West Coast, and at age 16, 1980, my family moved to the East Coast. Age 20 I went to college on the South Coast. My best friend at college mentioned one night that he had lived on the West Coast, and you guessed it, his family bought the house off us when we moved. The ultra weird coincidence is that his mother was born on the East Coast, in the house that we moved into. Coincidence 2, Dad was doing some family tree stuff, and turns out we had a famous ancestor. While checking out his life history it turns out that he too was born in the East Coast house that we bought in 1980. This one is more glitch in the Matrix-esque, but I don't think it's worthy of that subreddit because although it's true and peculiar, it isn't that strange. Or at least I don't think so, but here I go anyways. In the late 90s, me and my family were taking a family vacation on the small tropical island of Guam one summer, like Hawaii but not as touristy, and around noon we decided to go have lunch right. All that morning me and my sister were playing and running around the resort hotel we were staying at, so we were a bit filthy. My mom tells us to go to our room and to quickly shower and change clothes while her and my older brother wait for us in the lobby. So we go to our room, which is on the ground floor by the way, this is noteworthy, and we take turns showering and getting dressed, and then we started to head out. Well, as soon as we step out the door and close it behind us, a huge chunk of ice about the size of a football falls about 8 feet in front of us on the grassy area right outside our room. Me and my sister freeze, look at each other, then ask WTF just happened? So, we step out onto the grass to inspect it, and sure enough it's a huge chunk of ice. We look up and on this 100+ degree day, on a tropical island on the South Pacific, and there was not a cloud in the sky. We go to the lobby and tell our mom, but she doesn't believe us, so we go to lunch and continue on with our day. The next day me and my sister tell the receptionist at the lobby about it and she turns white. We asked her what's wrong and she tells us that in the Guamanian culture a block of falling ice from the sky is some sort of bad omen. We thought she was messing with us, but the other people who worked the lobby confirmed it. Nothing ever came of it though. Weird, right? In high school I went over to my girlfriend's house to hang out. We hadn't eaten dinner yet and we were both getting pretty hungry, so we were unsuccessfully debating what we should eat. Suddenly we hear a thump come from the kitchen, and since we were home alone we went to investigate. One of the recipe books that her dad keeps on the refrigerator had fallen off, but it was like 7 feet away from the fridge and had opened to a certain page, chicken and mushrooms with rice, so I jokingly said maybe we should make that? We checked the kitchen and she had all the necessary ingredients. After we collected them we turned to the stove and there was already a large, clean skillet sitting on it, ready to go. My girlfriend claimed she hadn't done it, as she had washed all the dishes earlier that afternoon and put them all away. I thought that maybe she was just messing with me, but she was convincingly serious. So basically, some friendly ghost helped settle a small argument by saying, "Look you dumb shits, cook this and shut up." It was delicious, by the way. When I was in school and teachers intervened, either nothing would happen, I'd get bullied harder, or they'd make us both apologize to each other. She told everyone I was filming girls in locker rooms I've never seen the inside of, emptied bags of chips in my locker, they threw food at me in the cafeteria. They told me to kill myself all the time and were brutally cruel. I had to apologize to them. Before my mom was born, my grandma had a miscarriage. Fast forward, my mom is carrying toddler me up the stairs, in which the wall is decorated with family pictures. I stop my mom in front of a picture of my grandma and tell my mom that it was a picture of my mom. She explains that it's her mom and not mine, in which I replied that she was my mom for a little bit first. Couple of months later I go running into my mom's room at 5 in the morning to wake my mom up to tell her that I had to go visit my mom today at the cemetery because it was her birthday. Toddler me had no way of knowing this, but I was right. Nothing like that has happened since. Broke up with my GF in 2003 and gave her our black lab because I would be traveling. Didn't see them again. 6 years later I was in a hotel in Jacksonville and had a recurring dream for 4 nights in a row. In the dream I would walk into a white room and across it to a hallway that was on the other side. I would kneel down and call my black lab, whose name was Dallas. Dallas would scamper out of the hallway and run right past me. I'd call her again and she would turn around and come toward me and sit down in the unique manner in which she sat. Except Dallas was no longer black, she was white. Underneath the white fur were black roots, and her eyes were sewn shut, but she was the beautiful dog I loved and I kissed her on the face. This dream repeated 4 nights in a row. On the 5th day I decided to write my ex-GF an email and tell her the dream. She wrote me back and explained that Dallas had cancer and was euthanized 5 days ago. She said she thought Dallas always wondered what happened to me and wanted to visit me one last time. I bawled so hard and I'm nearly bawling now at the thought. So I work in a supermarket, and suddenly this guy walks up to me, and basically says that he's gonna steal something and that he would really appreciate it if I wouldn't tell my boss. He didn't like it when I told my boss. Taking an afternoon nap after a short morning shift at work. I hardly ever nap, but I had plans to go out for late dinner with my girlfriend, so I wanted to rest up. I laid down on the couch. It was absolutely silent in my apartment. My ears started ringing, louder and louder, nearly giving me a headache. It was keeping me from falling asleep, so I sat up and looked for the TV remote for some background noise. Got the remote, aimed it at the TV, and sitting on the floor in front of the TV, with his back to me, is my brother, Lee. Startled, I jumped up and said, "Hey, when you sneak in?" He doesn't move. I get a very strange feeling, goosebumps over my entire body, chills, feel like I'm going to throw up instantly. Without moving at all, I hear him say, "Everything is cool, man. Don't worry about me, I'll be fine." I'm confused as hell right now, and for some reason I'm going to vomit my guts up. I run to the bathroom to puke. Dry heave for about 30 seconds. Go back out and Lee is gone. I start yelling, "Hey, where'd you go?" No sign of him. I call him. No answer. Text him. Waiting for response. I lay back down, but no way I'm sleeping. I feel 100% better suddenly. I decide to go clean my car out so my girlfriend doesn't have to sit on McDonald's bags. Phone buzzes. It's my mom. Lee has been in a bad car accident a few hours ago. He's at the hospital now. He dies in the emergency room. Many years ago I was up in the attic of my parents' house. I slipped off of the boards and put my foot through the ceiling. When I looked through the hole that I had created, I saw the garage. That made no sense. I should have been looking at a carpeted hallway of the second floor since I was on the other side of the house. I sat there for several minutes trying to wrap my head around what I was looking at. Eventually I thought I must somehow be confused about where I was in the attic. I climbed down, walked out of my room, and there was the hole in the ceiling, right where it should have been, second floor, carpeted hallway. It's been nearly 20 years and I still can't figure out what happened. This may sound crazy, but here goes. In college, my then boyfriend and I lived in an old house near campus. The house always kind of gave off a little bit of a creepy vibe, but nothing ominous. After living there about a year, I started seeing things out of the corner of my eye, things I couldn't explain but would convince myself weren't there. One day I was walking through the living room and could have sworn I saw a youngish guy with long hair, wearing jeans and a bandana sitting on my couch. When I looked again, he was gone. Shortly thereafter the boyfriend's things started getting messed with. He'd left a stack of magazines on the bed while he went to shower. When he came back they were spread out across the bed. Not like the stack had just fallen over, but arranged in a grid. Another time in the shower, the water turned suddenly cold. He reached down to turn the hot water up only to find that the hot water was completely off. He started to feel creeped out, but I never got a bad feeling despite the things I'd seen. I joked that we had a ghost, the bandana hippie guy I saw on the couch, and he had a crush on me. One night, boyfriend and I were cooking dinner together. He came up behind me at the stove and started kissing my neck. I joked, "Be careful, Jed," that's what we'd started referring to the ghost as, "Isn't gonna like you doing that." He laughs and just says out loud, "Sorry Jed, you can't have her. She's mine." No sooner had the words gotten out of his mouth, there was a huge crash in the next room. We go into the living room to inspect and find that the glass door to our entertainment center is completely shattered. Pieces of glass were flung all over the room like the glass had been hit with something hard. After that, no more weird things happened. No more creepy feelings. No more odd occurrences. Well, it's nothing close to what I've been reading in this thread, but once in 7th grade my class was playing kickball and my best friend ran up, kicked the ball up to his left and started running to first base. While on his way there the ball hit a rafter on the ceiling and went hurtling back diagonally towards him and it hit him in the face as he was running. Funniest thing I've ever seen. Was sleeping over at friend's small apartment mid-80s, on the floor in a sleeping bag, between his bed and his little sister's bed. Middle of the night I woke up suddenly, but not alarmed, just suddenly very clearly wide awake. A quiet man's voice in my head said, "You should get up and move." I don't remember even questioning it, or it seeming weird, so I got up, over my bag to the foot of his bed, and went back to sleep. Sometime later, early morning, there is this huge crash, and we all sit up, alarmed. His cat had jumped up and somehow taken down a shelf holding this gigantic wooden 70s style stereo set, the kind with boxy wooden speakers, a turntable, cassette and 8 tracks, etc. Probably 60 to 80 pounds of gear total. It fell maybe 4 feet, and landed right where my head would have been. Mike yelled my name and rolled over, didn't see me down there, and looked around panicky like, and of course I was down by his feet. We just stared for a second and soaked in the implications. Yes, I got one for this. I was working a big Renaissance festival one time back in high school. My job was to ride around and clean the porta-johns. Not as bad as it sounds when you are 17 and working with your best friends. Either way, we stopped at this one john. It's about 6:30 a.m. and I go to open the door holding the shit vacuum. Once I open the door, boom, this old lady is on her knees giving what seemed like a painful blowjob. I only say that because he was making some noises that sounded downright painful at first, but maybe that was his calling card. Either way, she was in the moment. Now, this is a Renaissance festival, so most people are always dressed up and never ever break character. Well, them two didn't either. She looks up and smiles and he says, "Wench, I'm not done yet." To paint a picture, he was holding a king cup full of God knows what and was wearing a crown and full-on Henry VIII robe. She was in a full wench outfit. Surf style. I specifically remember the smell and him telling me in his medieval times lingo to shut the door because the king isn't done getting shined. Me and 3 friends walking home one night were looking up at the really bright moon. As we were looking up, we saw what seemed to be a satellite glazing across the sky. When it got it to the moon, it suddenly took a left, circled the moon and then zoomed off. I looked at my friends to confirm and 3/4 of us saw it. We all couldn't explain it. We thought it was a satellite that went into the moon's orbit, but that makes no sense really. Was reaching for the silverware drawer and it slid out on its own into my hand. Maybe I'm just strong with the force. When my dad was dying in the hospital, I saw a woman with long black hair walk from the side of his bed into a wall. This one still boggles my mind to this day. When I was in 8th grade, my family took a trip with another family to Reno. On the way there, we stopped by your typical gas station/convenience store complex. My friend and I stood outside the store, waiting for the parents. On the side of the store, in the dark, was a crotchety, long rolled up rug that had space in the middle, picture, like a tube. We just happened to be staring in that direction, when we saw some weird ass shit. Describing what it looks like is a bit inexplicable, cause I never saw anything like it. It was basically a large, thick, whitish-brownish, mucousy worm-shaped object that was slowly slithering out of the rug, like a snake. The thing was way too big to be an animal, and it looked really grotesque. It appeared to be animate, because it was slithering out. We instantly ran away, and we swear we saw an alien. I was at this market in Adelaide when I was 16. I was sitting on a bench with my boyfriend and his younger brother, eating ice creams from a food van. We were waiting for his parents to pick us up, as the market had finished. As we waited, we watched an old man pull his typical old man car into the car park under a tree, get out and sit in the boot of his car. This was pretty weird, but it got weirder. He took off his pants, he was squatting into the boot, he was taking a dump into the boot of his car while we watched. When he was done, he just pulled his pants up and drove off. What? During my college days, I came home and went to take a dump, and there it was. A footer floater right in my can staring at me. I was like, WTF. I knew my roommate is away and nobody has keys to my apartment but myself. How a foot-long pole of crap end up in my toilet? It even looked not older than an hour old, as it didn't start to break up. So that's the most unexplainable shit I have ever seen in my life. One giant wet shoe print on the footpath on a sunny day, no water near it, no other shoe prints, just one, perfect, clown-sized shoe print. One day I was cleaning my room and I heard a strange ringing/screeching noise in my head, like something out of a horror movie. For some reason I looked behind me and there's a huge centipede running towards me. Apparently I have spidey senses. This will probably get buried by now, but hey, maybe someone might see it. About 7 years ago I was living in a different house with my parents at the time, and I was living in the basement. My room was pretty large and so was my bed, on which I would always sleep on the side of the bed that was furthest from the door, which had a lock on it. Now one night I went to bed like usual. I would lock my door as I liked my privacy and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Now, do you ever get that feeling when you are sleeping that something is either looking at you or beside you? That feeling while you start to become aware out of your deep sleep but your eyes are still closed? This is the feeling I had in the middle of night. With my eyes still closed, I slowly opened them with that weird feeling, and my room was pitch black. Remember, I am in the basement, no windows, And as my eyes start to adjust a little to the lack of light, I am looking straight up lying in bed, and all of a sudden I see a figure in the shape of a head in the darkness no more than 1 to 2 feet above me. Now at this point I am still coming out of my sleep, so I'm not sure what's going on, so I just stared at it for a bit. Then all of a sudden I hear a loud whispered "Hey." At this point I jumped out of my bed totally spooked, quickly ran across my bed and switched the light on, but no one was in my room with me, and my door was locked. I couldn't explain it, but I knew something happened. And I never was one to believe in the supernatural, and I'm still not sure on the subject, but something happened that night. Hell, I felt its breath when it said "Hey." I'll never forget how it sounded and how it felt. So strange. Nothing ever happened like that again to me, and I've moved out of that house. In college I did the graveyard shift for my job, so I would be up all night and sleep during the day. On one of my days off, my roommate woke up in cold sweats and came out to the living room where I was watching TV. It was 3:46 a.m. He told me he had a dream where his grandfather died. He went back to sleep and he got a phone call from his dad at about 7 a.m. His dad told him his grandfather died, and on the report it says his grandfather died at 3:46 a.m. I can't explain that, and that creeped me out. Right before my senior year in college started, my friends, brothers and I rented a house a couple blocks from campus. I had a summer class, and after it was over I got a text from my brother asking me to assemble some furniture for him in. Yay, alright, no problem. So I walked to a rental house, up the stairs and into his bedroom. 30 minutes that consist of nothing but Led Zeppelin, and me cursing at the furniture I was assembling go by without incident. All of a sudden my instincts go crazy. I got this ominous feeling that I wasn't alone, and that I should leave now. I stopped the music, and realized I could hear someone walking around downstairs. That's odd, none of my housemates are supposed to be here today. So, making the classic horror movie mistake, I walked downstairs to see who's there. No one in sight. Odd, so I checked the entire house, closing and locking the door of every room that I searched. My search only confirmed that I was alone. My instincts are still screaming at me to leave despite knowing that I was alone in the house. I put it to the back of my mind, go up to my brother's room to continue assembling his furniture. I locked myself into my brother's room just to put my mind at ease. Another 30 minutes of Zeppelin and cursing go by, and I very fainting hear a door creak open. That's odd, I think to myself, all the doors are locked and shut. So, I walk out of my brother's room and proceed to check every door in the house. All locked. Then it hit me. I didn't have to open the door to the room I was working in so I could check the rest of the house. The door that opened was the locked door that separated me from the rest of the house. I calmly walk up the stairs, grab my school bag, and full sprint down the stairs and out the front door. When I closed and locked it behind me, I swear I heard a soft thud from something colliding with the front door from the other side. Worked at a wine store for a while. One time I dropped a very expensive bottle of champagne. Can't remember the brand. But it was kept in our specialty wine room. The floor was tile. The bottle dropped, hit the floor, then bounced back up and I caught it. The bottle didn't break, crack, chip, or anything. It just looked normal except for some extra bubbles. Can't explain it, but it was pretty awesome. Back in 5th grade, one of my friends had gone to the dentist or doctor and came back to school during recess. She had brought all of our friend group these little plastic dogs that had legs which could move so they walked. After recess, we all put our dogs in our pockets and headed to lunch. We got our food and sat at the table. Then one of the girls pulled out her dog only to realize 2 of its legs were missing. We looked all around the lunchroom but couldn't find the dog legs, so we gave up. I opened my milk carton, had been closed the whole time, and saw something floating in it. It was the toy dog legs. Somehow, they had gone from attached to the dog in her pocket to floating in my closed milk carton. Everybody freaked out. It was 1997. I was 16 years old, browsing through CDs at a local music store. I popped one in by a band I'd never heard of called Corner Shop. When Brimful of Asha came on, I realized I knew it pretty well, and I was walloped by a torrent of vivid but fey memories. I remembered sitting in my music room in the basement of my parents' house with my cousin Michael, 4 years younger than me, and listening to it. I remembered we were bathed in red light, and that we both had really enjoyed it. As I listened, I thought it was a little strange that Michael had introduced me to the song since he was so young and normally it was me showing him new music. I also thought it was strange that I had apparently totally forgotten about the song. The memory felt very dreamlike. I couldn't nail any details down, like, for example, when exactly we had listened to it. Though I could feel that it had happened about a year or two earlier. I bought the CD, and a week later Michael came to my house. I said, "Hey, I bought that corner shop album that has Brimful of Usha on it." He stared at me like I was speaking Farsi. "What, the song you played for me in the basement a year or two ago?" He had no idea what I meant. We went down to the basement to my music room. I popped it in the CD player, we sat down, and I played it for him. I had recently installed a red light bulb down there so my music videos would look cool. As we sat there listening to it, he insisted that it was definitely the first time he had ever heard it. He said he really liked it, but he kept thinking I was making a joke about us having listened to it before. I couldn't understand his odd reaction. Then suddenly, I looked at the red light illuminating Michael, and our positions in the room. I realized that then and there we were experiencing the event that I had remembered back at the music store a week earlier. It gave me the heebie-jeebies, something fierce. I also then looked at the release date of the disc and saw that it was 1997. So the year or two earlier thing was impossible. Anyway, I've lost sleep over this on several nights since then because the memory was so vivid. Yet, I possessed the memory before the event happened. I've never been able to begin to explain it. I often wanted to ask Michael about it again, but he had a brain aneurysm a few years later. He laughs a lot now, but he can't remember much of anything from long ago, or recently. I was about 12 or 13. I lived on 5+ acres of land that was literally wide open as far as the eye could see, even outside of the property, no trees, no buildings, nothing. It was summer and I was outside mowing grass and my father was working in the garden when, out of nowhere, a passenger jet, I have no idea what kind, perhaps a 747, came over the property so low I could see the windows clearly and hear the immense roar of the engine. I could literally feel the pulsing of the engine. I stopped mowing and start running back to my house and my father started running back to the house and we just stopped and stared at it. Then, I look at my father and ask what is happening and he looks at me and shrugs and talks, screams, actually, about how cool this is. Mid-scream sentence the sound is gone. And he is clearly yelling over nothing. We look up and there is no plane, nothing. We hop in his truck and drive all over the township looking for this plane that was clearly low enough to be seen by people. We did have neighbors, just nothing big enough to block out any sections of the sky. No one saw or heard anything. They all looked at us like we were crazy. We just watched the news for the rest of the day, waiting for something to come up about a missing jet, or an unexplained low-flying jet. Something. Nothing came about it. To this day, it still freaks me out. I was 22 years old and went to a meeting with my parents in Chicago. We stayed at the Hilton on Michigan Avenue in 1982. That night, I had a terrible feeling that the hotel was going to catch on fire and people were going to die. I told my parents that I wanted out of this place. My dad tried to reassure me that we were going to be fine, but I couldn't stop shaking. He had already paid for the room and we weren't checking out. He finally calmed me down by doing a fire escape practice run. Sure enough, the next morning, while waiting for the elevator we were told to evacuate. The hotel caught on fire and 4 people died. My parents and I were fine, and our escape route worked flawlessly. My parents always listen to my intuition now, although I've never experienced anything quite like that since. My cat ran in my room and instantly hid behind my desktop PC. It then started staring right behind me with extremely worried eyes. To this day I have no idea WTF happened that night. My brother and I were 400 miles from home visiting family. We are hanging out with our cousins who brought us to a house that neither of us had ever been to before, my cousin's friend's house. As we pull up and get out of the car my brother stops us and says I've seen this house before. My cousins and I laugh this off saying that's impossible. But my brother insists he's seen it before. There's a cave in the basement, he said. Now I start laughing because that sounds ludicrous, but my cousins aren't laughing. My brother goes on to describe how the basement looks and where the cave is inside of it, etc. Freaked out everyone. But we did get to smoke in a cool cave in a basement, so there's that. A few years ago my best friend and I were sharing a house out in the country. One of her children was being fussy and wouldn't sleep, so we decided to take a drive down some back roads. About 10 minutes after I start driving we are pretty far into the boonies of my city, where the street lines are few and far between and everything is terrifying. I only glimpsed them, but I swear to God I saw a pack, 3 or 4, of the most mismatched creatures ever. They were like little pigs, with human teeth and eyes, but their skin was an odd shade of pink and it was wrinkly, as if they had all rapidly lost weight. I screamed and floored the gas pedal all the way home. As we neared my house, about 4 houses down, I saw another similar creature that was the same shade of odd pink and had the same texture of skin. This one, however, was taller and standing upright on 2 legs, half hidden in the shadows. We rushed the kids in, but neither of us slept that night. The next day someone or something had slashed 2 of our car's tires. I'm not sure if this is unexplainable. Hopefully someone here can provide an answer for why it happened, but mine came from summer camp music festival. It was oppressively hot and bone dry, as the area hadn't had rain in quite a while. I was walking back to camp from a show, and had just gotten to a point where the wide path opens up to a large field, where everyone was camped, when it began to rain. It was a very light rain, barely more than a drizzle, but it felt like heaven. I looked to my right towards the tree line, and just happened to see a very large pine tree do something I've never seen happen any other time. Keep in mind there is no wind, and not enough rain falling for the weight of it covering the tree to explain what occurred. The best way I can describe it is the tree taking a bow. It bent over to an angle far too great to be caused by anything but the strongest of winds. As I was trying to process what I was seeing, it snapped upright again, and released more pollen than I thought a pine tree was capable of producing. It was far too much to remain airborne, and, as I found out after approaching to investigate, covered the ground, tense and unfortunate people below with about 2 inches of dry, sneeze-inducing pollen. The people who were covered seemed to be the only ones more surprised than I was. My girlfriend at the time spent the rest of the trip with the worst allergies she said she ever had, though it didn't seem to have any effect on me. I have played this moment over many times in my head, and can't figure out, aside from a reflex-type response to the rain following such a dry spell, how or why the tree did this. It remains to be one of the strangest things I've seen. Edit: it was summer camp, not Summerfest. Contrary to what many people think, I wasn't on hallucinogens at the time. I don't think it was a microburst because it was clustered with many other trees and none of them moved. I'm pretty sure it wasn't someone climbing to the top and swaying back and forth, as these trees were huge, 80 to 100 feet. Anyone breaking the top off of that and falling, or jumping out from the top, would likely be a dead man when they hit the ground. I don't think it was an eagle or other animal jumping from the top, as it wasn't an immediate back and forth action. The tree leaned over during the course of a few seconds, whereas something jumping from the top would be much faster. Again, because of the height, it wouldn't have been someone tying off their hammock or tent. I appreciate all of the replies, but none of them seemed to quite fit what it was I actually saw. It really seemed like either a reflex or a willful, I know, tree, so probably not, action from the tree as a response to the water. That's the best thing I can come up with, but I don't think I'm right. We live in an era which technology is so advanced that we can send people to space. Yet, we can't even locate a wide-body jumbo jet which was lost in the ocean. So when I was a kid, my mom, little brother and I were in my mom's old GMC Jimmy driving home from some family outing. We're on the highway when my mom gets a flat tire. She pulls off the side of the road and it starts pouring rain. So my mom is trying to change the tire in the pouring rain and my brother is going crazy for no particular reason. He was a crazy kid. This moving truck pulls over and these 2 beefy mover dudes come over and offer to help her. At this point my mom just wants to get my brother to shut up and she doesn't feel like she's gonna get murdered, so she accepts their offer. After they're done, she takes down the information of the company so she can call and personally thank their boss. They give her the info and leave. My mom gets home and tries to call the number but it didn't exist. Confused, she goes to look up the name of the company only to find out that there's no moving company by that name. To this day she calls them her beefy guardian angels. 1. I was at a red light, second in line. The light turned green and I got a wicked foot cramp, couldn't hit the throttle. People start honking at me. A transport truck runs the red light, barely missing the back of the first car, driving straight through where I would have been if I went. 2. Was with a friend going to visit his friend. He lived in a basement apartment. We had the key so we just walked right in like we always do. He was in the kitchen and we have to walk through the den to get to the kitchen. As we walked by, we saw a guy sitting on the couch we didn't recognize and said hello as we walked by. He always had various people over, so we didn't make anything of it. When we got in the kitchen, I asked, "Who's that guy on the couch?" He instantly went pale and ran to the den. No one was there. He asked what the guy looked like, and we described an older guy, balding, wearing a red sweater and khaki pants. Apparently he had seen this guy before, sitting in the same spot wearing the same thing. He told us to wait while he goes up to talk to his landlord. He came back about 5 minutes later with a picture of the guy we had just seen. He was the landlord's uncle who died a few years earlier falling down the stairs. To this day it still gives me an uneasy feeling thinking about it. 3. A few years ago, I saw 3 meteorites land in 3 different locations about 200 kilometers from each other in a 1-month span. The third one was on the local news because it was relatively close to Toronto, but there were no reports of the first 2 that were in more remote areas. When I was 12, I woke up in the middle of the night terrified of my windows. My whole body was in complete fear mode and it told me to stay away from my windows. I wasn't a kid to be afraid of the dark, or anything, so my fear was super unusual. I slowly got up out of bed and made my way to the foot of the stairs, one of the only places in the house away from any windows. There was a solid wood front door which I stood in front of and looked up, in the direction of my sleeping parents up on the 2nd floor. I saw our little apricot poodle simply sitting at attention at the top of the stairs. The lazy bastard was never up at night. Just then, a bluish-white light poured out of the peephole in the front door and beamed its way onto the front stairs. I couldn't handle the implications of the light streaming in from the peephole like that, and ducked under the light and walked with my head down to my bed and closed my eyes under the covers. In the morning, my mom's friend said that on a talk radio station, people were calling in about seeing strange lights over the city that prior night. I once stayed in room 410 of the Queen Anne Hotel in San Francisco. Woke up in the middle of the night needing to go to the bathroom and saw what appeared like a decaying woman with withered flesh and a blue/white glow at the foot of the bed, seeming to stare at me, in spite of having eyes that were just black sunken holes. It was so terrifying I passed out. Woke up in the morning and told my girlfriend at the time about it when she came over. She laughed, and when I asked why, she said she booked that room because the hotel was supposed to be haunted, that room specifically, and she was using me as a blind test case to see if it was true. Ended up staying there another 3 nights without anything odd happening. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.